Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Thursday, January 30th. Derek VanRiper, Sarris here with you. Pitcher Week continues. This is the third episode we have focused on starting pitching. The conversation will pick up in just a couple of minutes. Around that pick 175 to 200 marker, I was overly optimistic in part two of the series. I thought we could cover a little more ground than we did. A couple reminders before we get started. You can join our Discord with the link in the show description. There you can have a lot of conversations about fantasy baseball, different teams, the moves they're making, or you can jump into the Hive Mind Rankings channel, submit your rankings for our listener ranks. Those will be turned around probably in about 2 weeks or so. We'll let a lot of responses come in. All the positions we've talked about so far in this series are available for your submissions. Thanks to the many of you who've already taken the time to offer those up. Okay, preamble short today, because we are behind. We continue in what we call the Tier 5B. The tiers just have no meaning anymore. They're just slices of players that we're looking at along the way. It's another huge group. I think it's 8 pitchers. Ryan Pepiot, Shane Baz, Brandon Pfaadt, Seth Lugo, Sean Manaea, Cristopher Sánchez, Taj Bradley, and Zach Eflin. A very different group of pitchers offering some pretty different things along the way. But I love that Ryan Pepiot is first because you seem to really like Ryan Pepiot quite a bit. And I'm wondering just how long we're going to see him living in this space just in front of pick 200.
First off, maybe the most interesting thing is the negative thing. As a king of wafflers, I have to start with the negative, I guess, even though I love him. And that is that the old park, Tropicana Field, the normal Rays Park, has a park factor for Stuff Plus. It is the park that inflates Stuff Plus the most. We've been talking about why does Tampa have this park factor for strikeouts, and I think we've figured it out. It's not necessarily the lighting. It's not necessarily, something to do temperature-wise because it is a dome. It's that the factors, I think it's the dome in that it's the perfect conditions. It's like being in the lab when you determined that your pitch wanted to have 18 inches of ride and this many, like it's perfectly set up to do exactly what you meant it to do. And so what you find is it's inflate Stuff Plus. So when you go back and look and you see that Tampa Bay Rays lead the league in Stuff Plus, that is A, because they select for it, B, because they train for it, they coach for it, they're well aware of it, but also C, because their park inflates it. And so all of their pitchers have had, some pretty intense splits at times. I mean, we saw Aaron Civale, before he was traded to Milwaukee, he had these tremendous splits where he was completely usable at home and almost completely unusable on the road. So that is a piece of information that should make you nervous about all Rays pitchers next year because they will be moving to Steinbrenner Field, where we don't know that necessarily the dimensions are going to be much friendlier, but they'll be a little bit friendlier than the Trop, but they won't be inflating the Stuff Plus. I think, and this is a little bit of a feeling out process, but I think that Ryan Pepiot's stuff is good enough that it doesn't matter. And so I have prepared for you some Pepiot propaganda. This is, what is this now? I've made so many boards now, I've forgotten. This is the lowest projected ERA. So PPERA is the oopsie. Lowest projected ERA for pitchers available after pick 150 by ADP. And you'll see Clay Holmes is at the top. I don't know how fair that is. It's really hard to model a transition from reliever to starter. Kumar Rocker is super exciting as a late pick. I think a question of innings is a viable one. Brandon Woodruff, it does not have the input that he just had. I think it's thoracic outlet surgery, right? So he missed a whole year and is coming back from a shoulder problem. He's actually kind of going a little bit higher than I would take him right now at 236. Ben Brown is a super exciting, but a 6th or 7th pitcher right now. Clarke Schmidt is a guy who's ended up on a lot of my teams. Gavin Williams has ended up on a lot of my teams already so far. And Ryan Pepiot has ended up on a lot of my teams. So right there is a beautiful 1, 2, 3 combo. You can put those 3 on your board and wait if you want. But if you can, as you can tell, Ryan Pepiot has the best Stuff Plus of the group other than Clarke Schmidt, and he has a better inning situation than Clarke Schmidt. He has a very similar ERA and K projection to Clarke Schmidt. He has I think that park is whatever it's going to be better than Yankee Stadium. So even if Ryan Pepiot drops 2-3 points of stuff plus, he'll be around Gavin Williams territory, and he has more innings than Gavin Williams. So I love that trio, but Pepiot to me has the most innings of the trio. Other guys on this list are Reese Olson, Taj Bradley, who has a command problem and maybe a breaking ball problem. David Festa, who is squarely a 7 probably or a 6 starter. Jared Jones, who we've already said we love, and Luis Gil, who I don't really have a bad word to say about, so other than maybe the command. So this is a good list of pitchers. This is a good way to sort, I think. But you have to also remember the context of the team. Where do they slot are they in the top 5? Are they more top 7 in their own team? Some park stuff and some injury stuff, and then generally what you think their innings are going to be. And Pepiot really, checks all the boxes for this tier of pitcher.
Yeah, I mean, I got the sense that with the Rays pitching, it's just sort of a coincidence. They were underpriced even before the disaster. The hurricane destroyed the Trop, and they had to move to Steinbrenner Field for the season. I looked at that group and I thought there's skills growth potential with most of them. Even in the case of someone like Shane Baz, the stuff seemed like it was sort of coming back over the course of last season. Initially didn't quite look like himself, but by the end of the year, and even by the results, was really, really good. So you could start to tell yourself a story that this was a group that the market might have been missing on. I think the margin is just smaller now, because I think the main thing is, yes, if the Trop is playing like a pitching lab and boosts strikeouts the way that it does, if you just lose strikeouts, you have more balls in play. That alone, regardless of the dimensions of the park, is going to work against you a little bit. And then it's a question of okay, is it average? Is it hitter friendly even at Steinbrenner Field? Like, how aggressively are we going to have to peel back on projections for the Rays pitchers? And then, of course, how much are we going to adjust the hitters? I think that's going to be an in-depth topic for another day, probably by the time we get to that Rays preview in a couple of weeks. But a lot to like here with Ryan Pepiot. The control has improved to the point where I'm not worried about him walking the world. That was something that was more of a concern when he was breaking through with the Dodgers. I think we've seen a little bit of an improvement there that gives you some confidence. It's more like average sort of command. I think that can play just fine. So I'm in at the price on Pepiot. Shane Baz goes right next to him. I know with the new stuff plus numbers, there may have been some changes, but it looked like things were pretty good for Baz coming off of major injury last year. And the only thing we didn't have right away were strikeouts. So do you think we're going to get a strikeout rate that looks more like the parts of 2 seasons we saw him for in 21 and 22 when he was breaking in with Tampa Bay? 21.6% last year, definitely a little bit of a disappointment, but first major innings coming off of major injury, I kind of want to give him a pass for that.
Yeah, I really like that he ended strong in terms of stuff. His old stuff, he had a 120 stuff plus to end the season, 4 starts, and 2 of those were away, so it wasn't all Tampa. His fastball was very comfortably above 100, which is a nice thing to have, and both of his breaking balls. His curve looks better than his slider, generally, which is a little weird, but I think that was a good thing to end. And then in terms of results, he even ended well. I mean, the last 4 starts, he had 23 strikeouts and 24 1/3 innings with 4 walks and a 2.59 ERA. That includes going to Boston twice and shutting them down twice, and Toronto and Philly. So it's not, super easy offenses. And again, away from home for 2 of those starts. So I like how he ended, and I like, the stuff generally. I think Baz should be considered about as exciting as Pepiot, except that I don't know that I give him as many innings. He had 79 last year in the major leagues. You have to add some minor league numbers to that. What did he have?
Yeah, I think it was 108 and 2/3 last year.
108 and 2/3. He's projected for 157. That seems a little aggressive. I think maybe like 130 is a more conservative prediction for his numbers. And then ATC likes him to a 3.93 ERA. Oopsie, a 4.09. I'm a little surprised that's not better. And Steamer to a 4.25. Right now I've got him, in the sort of late 70s, where it's where I put a lot of my sleepers. So, I'm not speaking ill on him, but I have Pepiot comfortably ahead of him. Right now, I have Pepiot in the low 40s. So that's a pretty big difference.
It's 118 and 2/3 last year from Boz between the two levels.
Okay.
I think 150 is possible. If they think McClanahan with 0 innings last year recovering from TJ can get to 150, I bet they also think they can push Boz to 150 and still have something left in the tank if they're a playoff team. So yeah, that gap of 30 spots in the rankings seems pretty wide. I like Boz at this price. I could see myself ending up with more Boz than Pepiot if you're going to keep hyping Pepiot in these next few weeks.
Yeah, there is my damn effect. But I've got 168 innings right now for Pepiot. And I'm going to put maybe like 141 for Boz. I'll move Boz up a little bit. This is a little bit low for him. My first pass was a lot of using PPERA to sort, and a 409 is not super exciting, but I like him better than somebody we'll talk about later, Seth Lugo, who has a 405 projection. So he should at least be. Kumar Rocker has a beautiful 336 projection. So and Boz is going to have more innings than that. So that may where he ends up around Clay Holmes, around Kumar Rocker in the 60s.
Yeah. When we get to Kumar Rocker, the question is going to be, how much confidence do you have in that projection? Because it's a great looking projection for Rocker, and it's aggressively ahead of some of the other systems that are out there right now. But we'll save that for a little later because Rocker does fall a bit compared to these names. Brandon Pfaadt, plenty of innings coming through the Diamondback system. He's been a relatively young workhorse, I think, in an era where that's become more difficult to find. I think he just needs to find a better approach against lefties if he's going to exceed, I don't know, the ceiling of what Nick Pivetta has done to this point in his career. I feel like as is, that's sort of like the best version of Brandon Pfaadt that we're likely to get. We did see improvement, though. The second half, strikeout minus walk rate was 22.1%. That placed Pfaadt 10th among 69 qualified pitchers. I think that's going to drum up some interest because all 9 guys ahead of him are being drafted earlier. It's the type of thing you can do for a half season that gets you into breakout and sleeper type columns. But we did see some adjustments. He was starting to use more curveballs against lefties late in the year. So do you trust that Brandon Pfaadt has enough in the arsenal to correct that main split flaw we've seen from him?
Well, I got something completely wrong. Like 2 episodes ago. I'm here to apologize. Remember when I put up the velocity changers and I said, people who are in this category, you'd want to think that they were feeling good and weren't hurt. Mm-hmm. The people who'd gone up in velocity. Well, we've got a piece from Russell Carlton that just came out yesterday on Baseball Perspectives called Should We Overthrow? And in it, he looks through the math and he looks at people whose velocity spikes and then looks at their likelihood of hitting the 60-day IL right afterwards. And he says it's statistically significant that people that throw past their peak and have a velo surge end up on the 60-day IL in the next season.
Okay.
So that's super exciting.
So you're concerned about the slide you presented 2 days ago?
I guess the thing, though, is he defined... I guess I might be. I mean, he defined it as a surge past their regular sort of sitting spot. And Brandon Pfaadt ended the season with 94.5. For the season, it was a 93.9. And for the season before, it was 93.6. So I think this would qualify. I wonder with Gallen, it was sort of like getting back to where he used to be. Maybe the true surger here is Logan Gilbert, who went up to 97.7 from 95.6. Does it count when you're sort of just a little bit up? I don't know. He didn't sort of show all of his math. And I'm trying to log in now, and logging into this site takes forever. So I'll give you an update on that. But that is the velo sheet that I would maybe look through a different lens at now. I would try to maybe then compare the surging velo. That's the second column or the third column here with their career velo to see if they were more getting healthy again or if they were surging past their regular velo. So that's something to think about a little bit. Pfaadt's velo in September was better than usual. But generally he's been a workhorse, and his numbers in terms of injury percentile are great. He's got a 94th percentile injury number from Jeff Zimmerman. His projections are okay, 383 PPERA. I'm going to give him 183 innings. So I think, given where he's going, like I don't really have a lot of guys who have 180 innings projected. The closest I have Zach Gallen, 174, a little bit ahead of that. Schwallenbach, 177. Yusei Kikuchi right here, 173. And then you hit a lot of people in the 130s and 150s after this. So he's like one of those last guys where you might get 180 innings. So that becomes really important in draft and holds, deeper leagues. In terms of upside, he's still young enough to have some upside. And like you said, figure out that approach towards lefties. So yeah, I have no problem taking Pfaadt here. I mean, yes, maybe some heightened injury risk because of that surge. But at this point, I would believe maybe the injury percentiles over the fact that he was slightly up in velo, over the course of his career, in September.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this for several draft seasons now, but among the reasons players move up over the course of draft season, it's, further research done by people playing, right? It's good stories or good podcasting, different bits of information making their way around. And the other way I think is people who have increasingly been willing to take the time to adjust playing time for themselves, going through modifying playing time and realizing that if you were to give Brandon Pfaadt 175 innings instead of the 139 next to his line from Steamer, that it will have a massive impact on what's going to happen in something like the Fangraphs auction calculator or a draft software. So
yeah, I have him top 50, and that bulk is a big part of that.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. So I do think he could move as people realize that the volume projection seems low. And if you fix it, it's going to nudge him up. And players get so clustered together at this part of the pitching board anyway. It doesn't take much to move up. And I think that's a pretty significant volume boost that we'd be giving to Pfaadt. And it's deserved at this point. So definitely a guy that I like in this range. And even someone I like if he gets a little more expensive this draft season. I feel like you've turned on Seth Lugo, man. I know that's a classic best season of your career at age 34. Not always the thing that you look at and go, well, that's coming back again. Maybe the Mets were a little quick to shift him into a bullpen role forever ago. It's a wide arsenal. It's a good home park. There are no workload ceilings. I guess, are you just out because the price is too high? Like, what's your reason for being cautious about Lugo right now?
He's a type of pitcher that I want to have one on every staff, and that is a pitcher off of this board, which is I did a very simple sort. Who has 6 pitches and non-terrible stuff? So 95 stuff plus and 6 pitches. That was the query. That's it. And of course, Zach Wheeler is on every good board, and so he's there. And then Spencer Schwellenbach has been on a lot of these good boards. Hunter Brown is on this board. Being on this board does not mean you are good because Randy Vasquez is here. But Tyler Megill is here. Walker Buehler is now a big Arsenal guy. Max Fried is here. So there are some expensive pitchers on this list, but there's also Seth Lugo, Zach Eflin, Sonny Gray, Michael Wacha, Yu Darvish, Cade Povich, interestingly, and Nick Martinez. I've actually found so far in my drafting season that Yu Darvish is the name that ends up on my leagues. He has a decent K projection and ERA projection, a little bit better than Lugo's actually. But really what it is about is I just don't want to pay high price for the lower guys on this. The Lugo, Eflin, Waka, Povich, Martinez, Darvish group. I just don't want to pay a high price for them. So I'd rather put them all in sort of a bag together and just, rummage around at the bottom of the bag at some point in my draft and get one than to pay going freight for Seth Lugo, just because this type of pitcher is the type of pitcher that can break out and have a great season, but also can struggle a little bit. Maybe the locations aren't there. Maybe the league has figured them out to some extent. They just don't have the overwhelming stuff that, Wheeler is the top of this list because he does have the overwhelming stuff plus the 6 pitches, right? When you're down at the bottom of this list in terms of stuff plus, I think things can go sideways. And I looked at this when I looked at my mistakes from last year, and I had just as many mistakes. I was like, oh, Jameson Taillon, I should have ranked him higher. He's a Seth Lugo type, right? But then I looked at mistakes like Jordan Montgomery and Merrill Kelly and other guys, and I was like, wow, the difference between Jordan Montgomery and Merrill Kelly and Seth Lugo and Jameson Taillon is that there is no difference. You know what I mean?
They're all cautions. They're the ceiling and floor for the entire group. And when they're good, you feel like a genius. And when they're bad, you feel like an idiot. And if they hit the middle, you're fine because they're usually not that expensive. But I'm glad Eflin popped on this board because when I look at Eflin, I just see a younger version of Lugo. And he goes a few slots later. I think it's interesting, too. Eflin's still on a good team. I know they're going to tweak the fences again in Baltimore, make it a little more difficult for pitchers again, probably trying to find that sweet spot now. Fine, whatever. But Eflin has better command by the model, better control in terms of the extreme walk rate, better team. I think the Orioles are better than the Royals still at this point, even though the Royals continue to make efforts to get better. And it's just funny to me that Eflin was kind of buzzy last year. I don't think he really showed us anything new, and he's a lot cheaper. So I kind of like the bargain here because I could see things playing out where Eflin is maybe even a little better than Lugo because we care about wins and other factors.
Yeah, just put them in a tier. Like I love queue management, right? Mm-hmm. If you like these guys, put them in a tier and wait. And if you start to see one disappear, hopefully you still get one of the other guys.
Queue management, love it. What are you doing with Sean Manaea, though? Because in the space between Lugo and Eflin at the bottom, he is one of 3 very interesting pitchers. Durability is relative, as we say a lot. Sean Manaea is now 21st league-wide in innings pitched since the start of 2021. Even if it's not at the top of the leaderboard, that's still very good. Much like Seth Lugo, it's really the best complete season we've seen from him as a starter at an advanced age. Manaea spending more of his career as a starter than Lugo up to this point. And I think as you've mentioned on this show, right, it was the falling arm slot that seemed like it really kind of made Manaea's stuff play up even more over the course of 2024. We love the park. We love the team context. Do we love the price on Sean Manaea in this range?
Yeah, I mean, Stuff Plus said it was a great idea. He dropped down, in mid-August and had a 127 Stuff Plus on his fastball afterwards because, one of the revelations from Stuff Plus was that the importance of your arm slot and the deception that it can provide. So that's a 127 in August. He had a 78 Stuff Plus on it the rest of the season. I don't know which one is, I guess the fastball or the sinker, it's a really weird pitch anyway. But both numbers went up. I mean, the sinker went from 83 to 110. So whichever one is his actual fastball, I'm not even sure what it is. It's kind of this weird kind of 2-plane thing that's not really a 4-seam, not really a sinker. But either way, the slot was really good for that. The problem was his slider was still, after the change, was still an 87 Stuff Plus, and the changeup was a 65. So he doesn't really have a wide arsenal, even if he does throw more pitches than some people. The new Stuff Plus also liked him a little bit less. I liked him a little bit more, I guess, 95 compared to 90 for the season. I don't have the start-by-start breakdowns in front of me right now for Sean Manaea, but a 397 projection is fine. he had 181 innings last year, so you're going to give him innings. So he's kind of oatmeal-y. I think he actually, even though he doesn't have that like 6 pitches and command comp to Eflin and Lugo, I think he belongs in that tier because it really could go either way. I think that his home park and team are going to give him wins. So I think the worst case scenario for Manaea is he's useful half the time.
Yeah, I think you do have to build in the expectation that you're using him mostly at home as one of a more reasonable outcomes for him. Like it's been such a strange path for him to be this good. I mean, we're a year removed now from a 4.44 ERA and a 1.24 WHIP with half of his games coming at Oracle. We're 2 years removed from a 4.96 and a 1.30 in San Diego.
Yeah.
Like those are great. Like Sean Manaea has spent his career in pitcher-friendly environments, and despite that, has had some pretty bad ratios when it hasn't worked out. So I do see the risk kind of baked in here. I think he's fine at this price. I would agree with you that he fits a little more into the Lugo Eflin mold, maybe a few more Ks, but with a little more ratios of risk.
Not as exciting as Pepiot and Boz, I don't think. I mean, I know he had a 3.47 last year, but I just, he doesn't have the same stuff. He's not young like that. He's not coming up. He's more like a guy in a good situation, maybe get one of them.
So I brought up Brandon Pfaadt's second half K minus BB percentage from this season because I remember on our preview a year ago, we talked about Cristopher Sánchez being really good in the second half with a 20.9% strikeout minus walk rate in the second half of 2023. It didn't carry all the way over into his full season as a starter, but it was still very good, right? 14.5%. Nice job. Didn't miss a ton of bats, right? It's more the result of having a low strikeout rate, 20.3%. Where do we go from here, though? Because Cristopher Sánchez does some very interesting things. He does get a lot of swinging strikes. He has to deal with a pretty difficult home park in Philly. Is he going to remain good or great at hit and home run suppression? Because I think when I look at his profile, you see that ground ball tilt. It kind of looks like a profile that could skew that way, being a little better than average at limiting damage on balls in play and keeping the ball in the yard. I just don't know if there's like another level here or if this is a younger than the oatmeal-y guys that's still going to like end up in the oatmeal sort of results.
Well, like I said earlier, I have him very close to Sandy Alcantara because I think the base skills are similar. I also have this board here of the best changeups in the game. And you'll notice that it's not a board of the best pitchers in the game. Pepiot is on here. Bobby Miller is on here. Grayson Rodriguez is on here. Hayden Birdsong is on here. Michael Wacha has the best changeup by New Stuff Plus in the big leagues among starters. Sánchez is right there by Fromber, who I think is pretty interesting. Fromber has the advantage maybe of being I don't know. Fromber, I think, is the guy for him.
Fromber with better command is a really good pitcher if that's what you think Cristopher Sánchez is going to be.
The velocity last year was new for Sánchez, I guess, 94.5, whereas Fromber has been sort of 94, 95, right? So, and then Fromber's sort of slider and cutters, stuff that he's been playing around with, maybe a little bit more advanced than Sánchez's, but I think Fromber is the guy. I think this is the starter package for Fromber. He's 28, Sánchez is, so it's not maybe as young as you'd think. But I guess the park is a little bit harder on Sánchez. He hasn't quite had the K rates of Fromber. But I think a lot of the building blocks are there. And I think the worst case scenario is he keeps the ball in the yard and is kind of like maybe what a Sandy Alcantara or a Fromber in Philadelphia would be, which is, mid to high 3s ERA, not great whip, not great strikeout rate. These are bad things. I'm making him sound bad, but I like him.
I got the sense you liked him, but yeah, that didn't come off as a go get him.
Yeah. I mean, he's not the like four seam and two breaking balls and kills it on stuff plus and is going to have great strikeout rates and, is a young guy, but I don't think he should be here. I think he can do 175 innings. It's a little bit like Pfaadt. It's like, no, he's good. And there's a lot of innings here.
Okay, so maybe underdrafted by a couple of rounds at least. Maybe belongs a tier up. I think that's a reasonable place to leave it. You feel good if you're getting him in this range. How do you feel if you're looking at Taj Bradley in this range? The Sierra came in at 369 last year, but the ERA was 4.11, 122 whip. Projections point to a similar whip and a slightly better ERA this time around. Plenty of missed bats, a lot of inconsistency with the fastball in particular, right? That seems like the problem. And the more I look at Taj Bradley, the more I wonder if he needs to do something similar to what Hunter Brown did. Add that two-seamer, and maybe that would be something that would reduce the usage of the four-seamer and give hitters, especially on the right side, something else to think about that's going to run in on their hands.
I mean, if I could give him anything, it would be a slider. I mean, it's not that often that you have a guy in today's league that doesn't have a good slider. Like by the new stuff plus, Taj Bradley has a 107 stuff plus cutter, has a 108, 109 stuff plus fastball, 108 stuff plus splitter, and a 111 stuff plus curveball. So he supposedly has everything he needs, but the cutter doesn't work against righties the same way. Curveballs aren't really whiff pitches. And so he really fell into this four-seam splitter combination, of which he doesn't have good command of either. So a slider would just be, if he could have it and command it, would just be a pitch he could throw in the zone for domination in the zone, as opposed to kind of dancing around it or being forced to throw his four-seam in the zone. So it's a delicate, the reason he hasn't broken out so far is a delicate combination of, needing an out pitch against righties that he can also throw in the zone and poor command. But the building blocks are all there. I still have him in the 50s, so comfortably above this tier. And I think his upside is even beyond Pepiot's, because it's a little bit more dominating when it's on. And we've seen both of these parts from Bradley, where he can be dominant. He can be amazing. His debut was amazing. And then he just can be terrible. So right now I have him around Nick Lodolo, which like both of them have tantalizing talent with a couple of issues.
One other thing here. It's weird the four-seamer gets such a good number in the model, because opponents slugged 500 against it last year. They slugged 556 against it in 2023. And when you watch him, it just seems like he loses it sometimes. Like, feel for it.
He throws it in the middle.
Right. It just ends up where he's missing is just detrimental in every way with that pitch.
Yeah.
But the other thing that came up, I think this was either you or Trevor that brought this up last season, is that there's not enough of the pitches he throws most of the time. Four-seamer, splitter, cutter. I think 91% of the time it's one of those three pitches. The range on that by average is 90.9 to 96.4. There's just nothing to throw off the timing of hitters either. So I think that's might be
everything's hard.
The other thing he could use is just something else off speed. So yeah, the two-seamer would be a thing he could do, but that might not be the best thing he could do. I think we've talked about it before. It's one more thing that lands somewhere in the 84 range, maybe would be the right sort of pitch. A slider. Yes, exactly like you said.
Slow the curveball,
Yeah, it's just something to throw off timing would be a really nice addition. So it seems like if you haven't taken a lot of shots, like high risk, high reward shots that could end up on your bench or even possibly get cut at some point if it's not going well, then Taj sort of fits into a build at this price point. Still things to like, even though it hasn't clicked for him yet. We move on to our next partial tier. This is tier 6A. Now we're going just outside the top 200 overall. I want to focus on a group of 5 to get started in this group. MacKenzie Gore, Nathan Eovaldi, Luis Heel, Nick Pivetta, and Spencer Arrighetti. Fun group to break down here. Gore got me thinking a lot about defense, because when I looked at his basic skills, I saw a better pitcher in 2024. Kept the K rate up at 24.8%. nudged the walk rate down for the second year in a row, yielded less hard contact, kept the ball in the park more often, only brought the ratios down a little, and it was the ERA. The whip actually ticked up a little bit. He went from a 4.42 to a 3.90. I thought, well, it's not really a great result, although Sierra sort of backed it up as far as a 3.98 from Sierra goes. But MacKenzie Gore has pretty good stuff and doesn't have terrible command. And I thought, okay, maybe some bad stuff's happened to MacKenzie Gore on balls in play. And sure enough, 340 BABIP, because the Nationals defense was bad last year. We talked about C.J. Abrams being a minus 17 outs above average at short. I thought it was interesting. Defensive runs saved wasn't nearly as bad. It was actually a +1 on Abrams, but they had Nick Senzel, Jesse Winker, Lane Thomas, all guys who are gone, grading out as very bad defenders last year. So just addition by subtraction, not having those three guys on the field should help a little. Nats fans might be quick to point out James Wood didn't grade out particularly well defensively. He, of course, will still be there and still very young, so maybe he could get better, just as Abrams could get better. Luis Garcia doesn't grade out as a great defender either, so they do have some holdovers that don't offer a lot with the glove or haven't offered a lot with the glove so far, but at least some of the brutal veterans they were trotting out there are no longer part of the equation in DC.
Yeah, and I thought, I'd look at the other teams that were both bottom 5 in OAA, outs above average, the StatCast defense, and then DRS, defensive run saved. They did have worse than average BABIPs as teams. You can see the median BABIP for the league last year was 288. Oakland had a 296. The White Sox had a 301. Washington had a 306. These were some of the worst BABIPs in the league. The only one that was on here that had a better than average BABIP was Cincinnati for some reason. But I went through those teams and found notable pitchers, and Gore had a 340 BABIP, like you said. He's just one of the worst, offenders on this. Calvin Fauché as well. But other names that may have been hurt by their defenses are Mitch Spence, Garrett Crochet, Trevor Rogers, Graham Ashcraft, Joe Boyle, Mitch Keller, Quinn Priester, Mitchell Parker, Nick Lodolo. So these are ones where you have to ask yourself, is the defense going to improve? And, because they could just be bad defenses and hurt them again. I think with Crochet changing teams, you're excited about that. Maybe with Trevor Rogers at some point. I don't really feel it big time, but Joe Boyle did change teams. And then you have to think about changing personnel. I think Oakland probably has some changing personnel. Jacob Wilson wasn't very healthy all year last year, so that's a better shortstop situation. Gio Urshela is a good defensive third baseman. So I think that they could improve defensively. I'm not going to suggest, though, that the Nationals are going to improve defensively. That's the weird thing about it, is Gore did hurt from it last year, and I think their infield defense is maybe not going to be any better than it was last year. Maybe their outfield defense will improve.
Yeah, I mean, Jacob Young in center is phenomenal, so if he's out there, that helps the whole pitching staff. So his playing time kind of matters a lot in this equation, especially for the more fly ball heavy pitchers. But I keep looking at Gore and wondering, is there one more level there? Projections actually are favorable. I mean, you see some 120s in the whip column. We've never seen anything better than a 140 from MacKenzie Gore over 3 years as a big leaguer. So are you buying into just improvement based on the skills and the things that he's been doing to get better over his time in DC?
He's a little bit like Bradley, where, I wish I could bequeath on him a better secondary pitch, but it is nice to start with, a good fastball like he has. And that's always going to make me, kind of be in his corner to some extent. I do like him. I think this is a great place to get him. I'm looking right now on Pitcher List because they've got a stat called V-Lock and M-Lock. And I'm trying to find it. It's how much they throw high in the zone. And he has a problem where, he wasn't throwing high in the zone enough. And he still, I think, should throw higher in the zone. Right now, he is high in the zone 34% of the time. And there's no real improvement on that number over the course of his career. And I think that number should be higher given the shape of his fastball. It has good ride. It's surprising ride given his slot. That actually could be a way that he could improve his BABIP. Because high fastballs provide pop-ups, and those have low BABIPs. Also, they don't provide grounders. And so it is weird that we've heard that maybe his coaching staff wants him to throw low fastballs to, have faster innings and get ground balls when they have a really, I think, objectively terrible infield defense. I think I would be like, hey, you don't have great gloves behind you. And there's some better gloves in the outfield. Let's get some fly balls and strikeouts out of this package. So, the more he does that, the better he can be. I think even throwing the high fastball more often will make his secondaries better, even if they aren't great just by shape and velo and stuff. So I think there's a little bit more that can be unlocked here. And I would say that command does hurt him a little bit, but I think there's a little bit more to unlock here. I mean, when I talked to him, he was talking about, how many things he has in common with Clayton Kershaw. And he does in terms of fastball movement and velo. He looks a lot like a young Kershaw. What he's missing is command and that slider. And he keeps trying to play with his breaking ball to get that Kershaw slider, and maybe he can find it.
Yeah, if he finds it, that changes the ceiling a lot more. But I think even with the restrictions of a bad infield defense or a likely bad infield defense, you could see the projections being optimistic and actually being right in the case of MacKenzie, Gore. Nathan Eovaldi looks like a high 3 ERA, low 1.2s whip, plenty of Ks. The question is just how many innings. And I think the good news is the velocity seems like it's stabilized for him over the last 3 years, kind of averaging 95 on the fastball year over year. Some fluctuations. I think he came up on one of your riser or faller boards that we talked about a couple of days ago. But is what you see what you get for Nathan Eovaldi at this point?
Let's see here. I've got a thing from Jason Collette. Let's see here. 6 pitchers have met these conditions from 2021 to 2024. Pitched at least 100 innings in each season. Had an ERA under 4 in each season. Had a whip under 1.25 in each season. So there's 6 pitchers. Fromber, Corbin Burns, Kevin Gossman, Logan Webb, Zach Wheeler,
and Nathan
Monsieur Eovaldi.
Yeah.
I didn't guess it. He had us trying to guess the 6th, and I guessed Fried, and Justin Mason guessed Waka, and it was Nate Eovaldi. I would say, though, that looking at just his inning totals is not the very best way to judge injury risk. He went from 109 to 144 to 170, but you can see the velo is dragging. It's not where it used to be, and we know is he a 2 Tommy John guy? Yeah.
Eovaldi. Ooh, is he 2? I think
he had one with Tampa really early on, before he even made it to big leagues.
Yeah, this is a quick search result. It's 2007 and 2016.
Yeah. 2016? Wow.
Yeah, 07 and 16.
Oh, yeah, because he missed all of 17.
And it looks like arthroscopic surgery to remove a loose body in 2019.
Yeah. So, I mean, really nice run of health since. And maybe he's found something mechanically, and he's, pretty boring but useful every year. He kind of has stretches where he's really good, and everyone says, oh my God. And then he kind of has stretches where he's not as good, And there's been a sort of a definite, trend in his velo where he kind of it's better at the beginning of the season and worse at the end of the season. So, he's the kind of guy that I think you draft for the first 50, 75 innings of the season. But if you're in head-to-head or best ball or something, I don't know. Best ball, I'd maybe be okay with him because he'd give you better weeks at the beginning of the season than, he's not there at the end of the season. But I wouldn't necessarily draft him in like a head-to-head where I'm like, this is, head-to-head American League only. Like, he's going to be one of my 3 best pitchers. And then you're like, crap, it's the end of the season and he's throwing 93 again. And I don't know if I want to even use him. So that's the only negative I really have on him. It's all in all, it's usually useful.
Yeah, that's the why do you get a discount on Nathan Eovaldi? That's the why part right there. You mentioned Gausman being part of that group. We did get a follow-up on Discord from Adam BL5. We talked about Gausman at the end of the episode yesterday. He wanted to know why there was no mention of the shoulder injury that Gausman had last spring. I forgot about it because the workload was so big last year. Like he did fall during draft season, ended up becoming a discounted guy. And we don't have an answer to this, but it may have been a big reason why the strikeout rate dropped as much as it did. I mentioned he dropped from a K rate above 30% down to like a 21% K rate last year.
Well, certainly we mentioned the velo drop, but it's really rare for a 34-year-old to get the velo back, even if a shoulder injury was part of the reason why.
Right. So just something to keep in mind. There was an injury there. Maybe pitching through that is part of why the decline was as sharp as it was. Could be a little more bounce back potential there with health. It's more of a, let's see what he looks like this spring. Where's the velo? That would be the sort of thing I'm looking for if I'm jumping back in on Gausman. But I appreciate that getting added to the Discord because it was worth mentioning. Back into this group.
67 injury percentile in Eovaldi. So just to give you a sense of, it's not always about innings. I still do have a 141 inning projection, which is okay for where he goes, but it's not. He doesn't make the same case as like a Pfaadt, that you're going to get a bunch of innings out of him.
Yeah, that's definitely the
I also have
question.
an update really quickly from. I just wanted to read the most important paragraph from the Russell Carlton piece. If a pitcher had a velocity spike in 2021 to 2022, what happened in 2023? And it says here that sure enough, when we take this slightly longer view, we see a significant association between velo bumps and trips to the 60-day IL and needing Tommy John surgery. These effects were independent of throwing really hard in general.
That's interesting.
But
so yeah, a jump from 91.5 to 93 is just as bad, seemingly in this case, as like 96 to 97.5.
But he doesn't tell me what a bump is.
Well, we should dig into that more later.
Yeah, maybe I'll ask him. I'll ask him what a bump is. Well, who's next?
Luis Gil. Is everyone just afraid of the 12% walk rate? Cowards.
It's great stuff. Even on the revamp didn't do anything to his numbers. He does have one of the worst projected walk rates. I'm now looking up and down. We've got a PPBB of 11.4%. I can't find anybody higher. Here we go. Hayden Birdsong, 11.5. Wow, that's it. Joe Boyle, 16.1. DJ Hurds, 12.3. I'm now off of my rankings, and I still don't have a higher one. Who's this? 12.1. Nick Nastrini at 12.1. So I guess that's a significant number there. Does that mean it's higher than Edward Cabrera? That can't be.
Are you going to go down that rabbit hole?
11.3 for Edward Cabrera. So no, hey, come on, it's relevant. I'm not just like bringing Edward Cabrera up for no reason. Luis Gil has a higher projected walk rate than Edward Cabrera. Come on, that means something.
That's probably why people are staying away after what was ultimately a really good season for the Yankees last year. A 3.50 ERA, 119 WHIP, 171 Ks in 151 and 2/3 innings. I was wondering if he was just losing steam as the year rolled along a little bit. But it's a 3-pitch mix. He throws everything to hitters on both sides. It's sinker, slider, change, I think is Gil's mix. And his velo and movement comps, which we don't talk about these a lot, but Baseball Savant does throw those out there. They're just kind of like a one-liner kind of mixed in on the page. 2021 Drew Rasmussen, 2021 Dylan Cease, 2021 Logan Gilbert, 2021 Ronaldo Lopez, and 2021 Luis Patino.
And that that last one was
it was going
that last
so
step
well.
Was a doozy.
I feel like I started you with a reasonable expectation at Rasmussen. Did the thing with Dylan Cease where it was like, hey man, Dylan Cease really only had 2 pitches.
That was Reynaldo, the reliever too.
2021, I think was the last time he was a starter, Ronaldo, right?
Okay.
And then it was a couple of years in the pen. So early career Logan Gilbert, like, okay, yeah, these are all reasons to be optimistic. Well, command is yes, your velocity and movement might be the same as those guys, but your command is not the same as the good guys in that list. Like even by command, like I would. Luis Gil has worse command than Dylan Cease, does he not?
Yeah.
They both walk a lot of guys. Like if you look at Luis Gil and everywhere he's ever pitched, every walk rate, everywhere he's ever been, is a double-digit walk rate. Now, the key here is that Luis Gil rarely has home run trouble. And again, a 107 home run rate with Yankee Stadium for a home park is not bad. And he does strike a lot of guys out. And to a less extreme, right? We have this conversation about Blake Snell all the time. It's finally fading to the point where it's like not as much of a big deal as it was earlier in his career. But does Luis Gil have the ability to sustain low BABIPs, right? It was a 237 last year. Projections are nudging him actually to varying degrees. I don't know, like 255. And then everything else, 271, 281. That's ATC at 271, Steamer at 281. Who's lying? Who's right with Luis Gil?
Yeah, I'm trying to look through some of the component stats here and figure out. If you are looking on the Google Doc, there are some there's some stuff in there with the components that the Stuff Plus can spit out, and so expected pop-up rate based on Stuff Plus for Gil is very high. So he gets a lot of pop-ups. Expected ground ball rate is pretty low, but that doesn't always have the same effect on your BABIP as you expect, because some grounders actually have a higher batting average than fly balls. But the expected swing strike rate is really high, and that can actually be meaningful, because I think there was a relationship found between strikeout rate and like strand rate in Sierra. So there's a guy here that creates pop-ups and creates whiffs, and to some extent you can maybe believe that he'll beat some of those peripherals, those like kind of old school peripherals that we would use to regress him. I think that pop-up rate is really interesting. 126 pop-up rate. I'm looking at other guys that have better. Tyler Anderson has a really good one. Here's a guy, JP Sears, another pop-up master. None of those guys can strike guys out like he can. And so I think that's really the answer here is Hunter Green is another guy who gets pop-ups and strikeouts like Luis Gil. So I don't know. I think he can stuff his way through this. And I like I said before, if you have a guy with the high stuff and you see the oopsie projection and they're different, it's going to be because of BABIP, and that's the case here with Luis Gil. And I believe he's more of a 3.69 ERA guy than a 4.20.
Right, and maybe the answer is right in the middle. Maybe he's a 3.98 if that's in the exact middle. Right, it's just right around a 4. That might be it. Again, it's going to come down to how well he continues to manage homers in particular. Unless he improves that walk rate, we've seen a handful of guys over time take those double-digit walk rates to 12% and at least whittle it down to like 9 or 10. That would also make a pretty big difference. I just don't think you can bank on it happening because of that long track record of struggling that way and because of the command numbers that you see on Luis Gil. Nick Pivetta goes in this range. I think he's just still a free agent because of the qualifying offer compensation attached, right? I mean, this is a guy that's probably going to hit that threshold where you're giving up an earlier pick if you sign to a multi-year deal. Biggest thing skills-wise that caught my eye with Pivetta, a career best 6.1% walk rate. And this is a guy, it's kind of like the opposite of Sean Manaea. His career has been spent in hitter-friendly environments between Philly and Boston. So what if a team like, I don't know, the Tigers were to swoop in and give Pivetta that multi-year contract he's looking for? Like how much does the park shape your interest in Pivetta? It seems like at this price, even a hitter-friendly environment again could work because the whip's really good. And if he lands in a pitcher-friendly environment, you might be really happy at the discount you're getting right now.
Yeah, I think that's the key for him. He was hurt really hard by the Stuff Plus upgrade, but still has an above-average stuff, a 106 new Stuff Plus. It was like 130 before that. But even at 106, he's a little bit better than Robbie Ray, a little bit worse than Luis Gil, but, has better command than those guys. The thing that, again, you have these component stats that it's spitting out like, oh, what's his expected home run rate? And he's pretty bad there. I have a percentile. There's a, I will put a glossary out there. Somebody asked for this on the Discord, is like a glossary of what all these things are. But if it ends with an S, that means it's predicted by Stuff Plus, and if it ends with a P, it's predicted by Pitching Plus. Just so if you're looking at the tops. But there's one called XHR 100 percentile. So how many homers you're going to give up as a percentile, and Pivetta is in the 82nd percentile, where high is bad.
Right. So he's likely to give a lot of homers anywhere. But
so if you send him to a good park, if you send him to a better park for homers, that's what I'd want to do. I think, Pivetta, he should sign maybe a 2-year deal with an opt out that, the first year is the $20 million that he lost, and he can recover and then leave without the quality, the QO attached to him.
Where do you think he's going to end up, though? Real quick. Is there like a snap call you think is a good fit? I love the Tigers as an.
No, I think the Tigers is a great one. I mean, you want a contender that. I mean, the Orioles could be a good one too. I wouldn't I wouldn't say pencils down on that Orioles rotation. The Blue Jays right now have Yairo Rodriguez as their 5th starter. I would put him on the Blue Jays. The Nationals could always just be a hey, yeah, we'll build up your value and maybe we'll trade you, kind of place for him. The Angels have Reed Detmers. They might be running out of money a little bit. And they bought some starters, but maybe the A's have more money left.
They still haven't hit that floor, I believe, based on the math out there. So.
Yeah, the Giants have Jordan Hicks as their 5th starter, but I think they're probably set with that. The Cubs got Matthew Boyd; he's their 5th starter, and Colin Ray's their 6th starter. They might be set. So maybe if the Padres, trade away Cesar King and get some salary relief or something, they could end up signing Pivetta as part of their constantly moving Cups philosophy of roster building.
I mean, you look at the Cubs, the Cardinals, both of those teams could use a boost. I just don't think the Cardinals are into spending right now. So that kind of rules them out. Spencer Arrighetti is in this group. I think he's a little bit of proof of how you can have intriguing skills and then the ratios still get banged up. Maybe he's Luis Gil's downside. I did see they were similar in terms of the location plus numbers. I don't really see a must-have sleeper with Arrighetti, but I see kind of a useful depth starter that could take a step forward. And usually he doesn't have a home run problem. You can look back through his track record. So maybe we haven't seen this true talent baseline there. Maybe we saw more of the adjustment phase numbers from him as far as the homers he was giving up last year.
And guess who agrees with you? The component stats spit out by Stuff Plus. So here we have expected swinging strike rate plus expected pop-up rate. Who's good at both? And Hunter Green is good at both. Like I said, Ryan Pepiot is good at both. Luis Gil is good at both. I forgot he's on this list. Spencer Arrighetti is on this list. And so you see X whiff S, that is whiffs projected by Stuff Plus. XPU is pop-ups projected by Stuff Plus. These are both sort of top 25 in both. These are the guys who are top 25. Dylan Cease is on here. Jared Jones. Cole Reagans is on this list. I mean, there isn't a bad pitcher on this list, and Spencer Arrighetti might be the worst. Yes, you can see his location plus is bad, but it's better than Luis Gil's. And I also have XHR 100 percentile. So Hunter Green is going to give out the most homers on this list. That makes sense with the park as a factor, but maybe also his four seam. Everybody else is 30th and below, and Spencer Arrighetti, 18th percentile. Dylan Cease had a 0.8 home runs per 9 last year, and for his career has suppressed home runs and is 7th percentile. Spencer Arrighetti had a 1.4 last year and is 18th percentile. So that's a big deal. It is not yet part of the Oopsie projections. But we're working on some daily projections with Jordan, where he's going to use these component stats that are spit out by Stuff Plus to do better DFS projections. And those projections are going to include specifically what does Stuff say about home run rate specifically, and let me use that to shape my home run projection. So I bet you the oopsie projection would be even lower if he had the time to include those. Because right now, oopsie is still the low man on home runs per nine with 1.23, but with Stuff Plus predicting he should be 18th percentile for home runs, he should actually have like a 0.9 home run per nine projection. And if you take away 0.3 homers per nine, like you take away a homer every 3 games, like I think his ERA is going to be under 4. So he's actually kind of a sleeper candidate.
All right, you're going to nudge him into the sleeper candidate status. I don't think he even has to get a lot better skills-wise to be useful in this range.
Plus, he's underpredicted for innings, I think. They've got 141 for him. He was 145 last year. I think the Astros need him.
Yeah, at this point, I mean, Fromber, Hunter Brown, Arrighetti, Ronel Blanco, Garcia's not ready for opening day. McCullers isn't ready for opening day. Who is their 5th starter right now? That's a question to be answered at some point. And they don't seem like they want to spend more money either. So a little bit of a mystery.
The Astros.
Well, but
they're like right at like an apron, and they I think they as much as they tried to make it. This is why I think Dana Brown came out and was like, "Yeah, Ryan Pressly didn't like me." I think he's trying to take attention away from the fact that was probably just a cost cutting move.
Could be.
Like if you could have Ryan Pressly, you'd rather have Ryan Pressly. Yeah. But if they were like, I'd rather have the $14 million, then.
I don't get it. I mean, they could bring back Bregman and get Pivetta, and seemingly everybody would still be okay as far as ownership goes. But that's a choice, so they will continue to operate that way. All right, on to a new tier. That always feels good. Feels like progress. It feels like this might be the last tier of the day.
We talk too much. Hey, you know what? I propose that we add another pitcher show later sometime. We'll have to figure out when. Maybe next week we'll have a second bonus.
I'll second.
All right, good. We have a second. We have a quorum.
Passes.
Motion passes.
There will be a 4th episode focusing on starting pitchers. I think we're still going to do closers before we do the 4th starting pitcher episode. We'll hash that out behind the scenes. But this last group we're going to get to today, all smashed together in the pick 230 to 250 range. The reason these tiers are goofy is because they change all the time. Yu Darvish, José Berrios, Tanner Houck, Bowden Francis, Brandon Woodruff, Clarke Schmidt, Ronel Blanco, Drew Rasmussen, Gavin Williams, and Jesus Luzardo. Another group of pitchers that generally I actually like. I want to shop in this range for at least 1, possibly 2 starting pitchers in back-to-back rounds around this time. Let's begin with Darvish. 106 pitchers have at least 300 innings pitched since the start of 2022. Darvish tied for 35th in ERA at 3.62. He's 28th in K-minus BB percentage, 50th in home run rate, 13th in whip. I will point out, though, a lot of the whip comes from the weight of a heavy workload in 2022 when he had a 0.95 in that category. That was with a sub 5% walk rate. Darvish is still very good, but at 38, durability increasingly going to be a concern. And it was personal matters that cost him a lot of time last year. So the innings count shouldn't be as bad as it was as far as like injuries go. Like that, it makes it look worse. It makes the injury side look worse, even though it's an unrelated issue that kept Darvish away. I do think it's just kind of like don't push him up. It's like if he's still sitting there, this is fair value, but I don't think he's way underdrafted. I think the risk is appropriately priced in.
Yeah, like what do you think of like Yu Darvish or Seth Lugo? Seth Lugo is going to give you more innings, and I've got Yu Darvish for 141. I think Seth Lugo, I will put a regression regression a little bit to like 186, but still more innings for Lugo, but possibly more quality for Darvish. The projection are pretty similar, but more strikeouts for Yu Darvish. And you never know that, like, you've seen this actually before, and this is a wonky science, just so you know. We tried to be good science here, but there is a little bit of a sort of every other yearish quality to Darvish, and not in just what I'm saying, like ERA. We've seen him have the injury he had last year before. He got it fixed, and he came back and he had a great season. So, I think it was 2018 with the Cubs, he had like the elbow injury. He got it fixed, and the next year in 2019, he's pitched 178 innings with 398. We've had this injury for him last year in 2023 with a 4.56 ERA. Last year he had a 3.31 after he got it fixed. And the missing time last year was not due to an elbow injury. So I think that sometimes the quantity catches up to Darvish and you see him regress a little bit after sort of higher quantity seasons. And that's the bouncing, the yo-yo effect that I'm talking about here that is not scientific. But last year he didn't pitch a lot. And it wasn't because he was hurt. And so I to some extent, I think maybe the 141 that I have for him is low. He used to be kind of a workhorse. And if he's coming out and feeling froggy and feeling good after last year, why can't he, he literally could throw 175 innings next year with like a 3.6 ERA, despite all the projections.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I just don't want to pay a premium for Darvish at this point. I've baked in a slow regression.
I have an example of a team that I just drafted Darvish, and it was in a draft and hold, and I can tell you exactly when I got him because I think he was my last pick. I got him in round 17 with the third pick of a 15-team draft. So that is 258.
Yeah, it actually happened. So sure, no problem then. But I don't think this is a typical, bump him up a few rounds and you're still getting a guy that should go inside the top 150. I don't think that's who Yu Darvish is anymore. The Sierra's clocked in right around 4 each of the last 2 seasons. That's with half those starts coming in San Diego. Mm-hmm. So plan accordingly. I think he's more of a depth guy than a building block. What the heck do you make of José Berrios, by the way? 2 seasons in a row now in Toronto with a 3.6 ERA, a sub 1.2 whip, and plenty of volume. So even though the K rate dipped last year, 153 Ks actually isn't that bad. It just doesn't look good next to 192 and a third innings. He's had a home run problem forever. That hasn't gone away. I look at the same leaderboard I was just talking about Darvish, the last 3 seasons from a skills perspective. Berrios is 67th in ERA, 67th in K minus BP percentage, 57th in whip, and 70th in Sierra. How is he doing it? I just don't see it. I can't justify drafting him right now.
Yeah, the Stuff Plus update was not good to him. He's down to a 90 Stuff Plus. And despite being good in K minus BB, the one flaw that I think in K minus BB is this sort of suggestion that both numbers are equally valuable. And what he's done is keep the BB low, but the K is low too. And that's kind of meaningful. Like, it's really rare to have a 19.5% strikeout rate and have a 3.6 ERA. Last year, among pitchers with 100 innings that had a strikeout rate that low, what you're talking about, his compatriots in where he was, Albert Suarez with he had a 3.7 ERA, but I don't think he got a little lucky. Colin Ray is right next to him with a 4.29. Ben Lively, Jose Quintana. I mean, some of these guys do have similar ERAs, but that's who he should be living with. Honestly, for me, is in the Tyler Anderson, Ben Lively, Colin Ray grouping. Which I don't think a lot of people are taking José Berrios in that grouping. He had a similar strikeout rate to Patrick Corbin, Martin Perez.
I just feel like this has turned meaner than it should.
Well,
it was never the intent.
I have him at 100 right now because they've got a 4.3 projection with a 19.9% strikeout rate. Now, maybe that's too low, but that's where he deserves to be according to my metrics.
I'm trying to come up with an explanation. I mean, he does have a lower strikeout rate than Seth Lugo, looking at the last 3 seasons, by a little bit. Lugo, 22.8%. Berrios, 20.9%. Last 3 seasons combined. Zach Eflin, 22.6%, because we're talking about the similarities between those guys. Eflin with the lowest walk rate. Berrios, 6.5% walk rate. Lugo, 6. Difference in ERA is almost a full run from Lugo during that span. Difference in whip, almost it's a full 0.1. That's a big, big difference. But I'm wondering if Berrios has kind of quietly made himself this crafty, slightly wider arsenal. It's not 6 pitches, but it's clearly 4, where he just has a way of doing enough to be effectively a good innings eater for the Blue Jays. Maybe
like a Charlie Morton.
I don't even know if that's right either, because I think Morton's K rates were higher, but the Jays are a good defensive team, right? And I think they got better with the addition of Andres Gimenez. They value defense. So it's kind of like the opposite of the Nationals situation. It's like the extreme opposite of MacKenzie Gore. Where you're like, I don't get it. Like how does he beat the results like this? I think the defense behind José Berrios is part of it. And I think maybe it's having some stuff that all kind of looks similar coming out of his hand. I don't have a full explanation right now, but it's
best
weird.
2-year run and ground ball rate.
Yeah.
So maybe he's sort of pitching to the defense a little bit.
Yeah. It's not even that different than what he used to do, though, man.
It's not that different. No.
I want to kind of lean into this as more of like maybe there's just something no one else will see, and that'll be a reason to just go after José Berrios. But
I think if he honestly like went 250 around you Darvish, then I would have him on my list. But he doesn't really.
It's just
I just can't.
Weird.
Yeah.
And the other reason, though, is like if I can't understand it, but I think I can give myself a reason to believe in several other pitchers in this tier, I'm at least going to choose based on what I believe in rather than something I'm not sure about. That's the other part of it. But further study on José Berrios seems necessary given what's happened the last 2 years relative to those underlying numbers. How about Tanner Houck? Added 70 innings year over year, cut the walk rate. K rate came down a little bit too, down to a 9.8% swinging strike rate. So maybe the K rate's not coming back. But I noticed something looking at Houck. The ground ball rate ticked up again. And the projection isn't amazing, but he's on a good team with a pitching program that I think we largely trust in Boston. And I started to wonder, is Tanner Houck turning into Logan Webb? Is he actually going down that path? Is he, instead of being a guy that's going to try and strike out 30% of the batters he faces, which he probably just can't do, he doesn't quite have the arsenal to do that, at least against hitters on both sides, maybe he's doing the next best thing. Killing worms, logging a lot of innings, and maybe he's one of those guys that can actually beat the projections the way Logan Webb was earlier in his career.
Dominating righties and walking lefties and hoping to get a ground ball that erases the lefty. There are still more righties than lefties. And if you look at this like pitch plot chart, you're right on. On the left is Tanner Houck and on the right is Tanner Houck. Logan Webb. The difference is that Webb's changeup, I think, is a little bit better. And you can see how there's more differential between Logan Webb's changeup and his fastballs than there is with Tanner Houck. But Tanner Houck's sweeper might be better. It gets more depth than Logan Webb's. But on the other hand, what I might like for Houck, and this is something he's tried, so I'm not sure, maybe it's not there for him, but you see the Logan Webb is what I talked about, the cutter being a possibility for him and the four seam, still being around. I don't know. Logan Webb has figured out how to mix those back in without depending on them. So maybe Tanner Houck can bring his four seam and cutter back and just use them as sort of surprise pitches in a way that people find have a hard time game planning for it. And so they're like, they think it's going to be the sinker and then, it's the four seam rather than, he throws four seams a lot in this count to lefties. You know what I mean? So like if he just sprinkles that four seam and cutter back in, maybe he has the upside of a Webb.
Yeah. So I came away looking at what Tanner Houck was doing with a new kind of refreshed view of what I expect from him. I like him quite a bit at this price, and I don't think anybody's crazy about him at this price. So you may be able to get a lot of Tanner Houck if you happen to agree. How about one of the guys that you liked as a pickup last year and talked about for maybe even more than a season now, Bowden Francis? Look at this. A 3.30 ERA, a .93 whip. Now he's up to a 2.88 for his career in the big leagues. That's 140 and 2/3 innings with a .9 whip. It's not with an absurd strikeout rate, but very good control. Does have a home run problem, but control's good enough to make that mostly solo shots. What's the next iteration of Bowden Francis? Is there one more level there? He's older than you'd expect for a guy that just broke through. He'll turn 29 in April.
I think it's just really hard to put together all the pieces to be a major league starting pitcher. We've seen this. It's almost like catcher, where their debut, like where they're finally put together age, where their peak age is maybe later because of this phenomenon. But if he could get back some of that velo that he lost, he was kind of more of a reliever in 2023 when he threw 94. But if he could, get to 93.5 or 94 and have average velo, that might be nice. If he could throw those breaking balls any harder, even without fastball velocity, the breaking balls are really slow. I think there could be something there. Everyone projects like major regression for him based on the fact that his strikeout rate is not amazing, his velocity is not amazing, and his BABIPs were crazy. It's tiny, 195 in 2023, 211 last year. Even Oopsie, who projects the lowest batting average on balls in play for Bowden Francis, says 267 with a 4.25 ERA. And so right now I have him a little low, but I have to tell you, there's something to Bowden Francis that I don't know if the numbers are capturing correctly. He added a splitter last year, and if you look at New Stuff Plus, it says it's around average. But guess what? It says it's better than Kevin Gossman's splitter, by Stuff Plus, which I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying that suggests to me that maybe Stuff Plus isn't that great with splitters, And so I have a feeling he could be in this weird bucket that's like, Tanner Houck is actually in a similar one. I think both of them will regress, but I think it's possible they won't regress as much as the projections say they will. You know what I mean? Like, if he has a 3.6 ERA with a 1.1 WHIP next year, he's going to beat his draft slot based on his projections
by a healthy margin. Yeah,
and like that would be regression, but also really good. And so Bowden Francis is in a weird grouping of pitchers that I may just have to go with feel in the rankings, where I'm just like, I don't know. I can't really tell you why, other than I think two soft breaking balls and a splitter and a fastball has good shape, and a guy with good command. I think he can put this together. I think he can actually do this.
5 more names to get to before we can sign off.
Oh my God. We have 15 minutes, 3 minutes each.
It's 6. Brandon Woodruff coming off of anterior capsule surgery in his shoulder.
I already touched on this. I can't buy him at this. I mean, it's anterior capsule. It wasn't.
Yeah, it wasn't thoracic surgery. He had Raynaud's syndrome that was causing that numbness and tingling. And
he thought
it's a very similar symptom that you get with thoracic, but it was
But anterior capsule is bad. Anterior capsule is bad.
It's generally
the outcomes
bad
for other pitchers has not been good. He missed a whole season, and we haven't seen him come back. We haven't seen him post surgery. This is maybe one where spring training will change my opinion, but right now I'm not drafting him.
Yeah,
almost like not drafting him.
One of the only notable names I can find, a guy that's had that procedure and then come back to pitch well, was I think Julio Urias had it in 2017. Mm-hmm. That was very young. 20. Right. A lot of the guys that have it at this stage of their career, I think Johan Santana had it in his 30s.
And that's not, he didn't really come back after that.
But his stuff was already ticking down pre-surgery too. I think part of the problem is this is not a group of pitchers that has a lot to look back at. And then, I mean, Santana, you're going back to 2010. We're 15 years into the future. Like the rehab and surgery and all those things can be a lot better. So look, I'm a guy who in my heart wants Brandon Woodruff to just come back and be an ace. It's more of a question of how much injury did you take on? Can you accept a guy on your roster who's not going to be ready for the start of the season, most likely? All accounts are that he's throwing bullpens and tracking well, but they're going to be careful with him. It's just it's a big unknown if he's going to come back to 90% of the pitcher he was or 60% of the pitcher he was. Pretty big error bar, I think, given the magnitude of the surgery. So it's a lottery ticket, cheap enough right now where I feel like if it doesn't work out and you cut him, you didn't ruin your team by taking the chance on Brandon Woodruff. All right, Clarke Schmidt goes in this range. Where do you fall on Clarke Schmidt? I think we've talked about some changes he's made over time to become a more complete pitcher that really support some of the skills growth we've seen, with the K rate spiking to a career best 26.3% last year. Only 85 and a third innings because of injuries yet again. I got to think the Clarke Schmidt health grade number is brutal.
Oh, yeah. Let me see. I mean, that's the only real problem I have with him. And I still have him pretty aggressive right now because with the Oopsie, it's a 356 projection with a 25% strikeout rate. So I really like that. But I have a 128 inning on him. He's 78th percentile by Jefferson Zimmerman, but I think that's actually too high. I think he should be more in the 60s or the high 60s, low 70s. Heel has a 70. Lodolo has a 73. Is Clarke Schmidt that much better than Lodolo? Maybe a little bit.
Pretty similar risk, I think, for me as far as how much I worry about them. But I do think the skills growth is very real. And this ends up being a decent spot to take that chance on Clarke Schmidt, even with the concerns we've seen on the health front really throughout his career. It's been a wide range of injuries that he has dealt with. How about Ronel Blanco? Got a lot of attention early in the season, the no-hitter, 31 years old. This season that he just put together in 2024, for his age especially, just came out of relative nowhere, right? I mean, the Astros had used him, I think, for 58 innings in the 2 seasons prior, 24 total appearances, only 7 starts during that span. It was pretty good, right? It was a 10% walk rate with a near 25% K rate, a sub-3 ERA, a 109 whip, decent home run rate. And we just talked about their depth chart a few minutes ago. Clearly a need for him to come back and be a workhorse in that rotation. You know, fastball velocity at 93.6, not amazing, but I think the changeup is a nasty pitch for Ronel Blanco. So what follows this incredible season? Projections are looking at this and saying, no way it comes back. So I think you're going to find a lot of skeptics out there. But I think some of your analysis on Bowden Francis kind of holds up here, where it's like, hey, wait a minute. He can fall part of the way back toward those projections and still beat the draft day price right now. So should we be interested in Blanco despite projections that get close to nearly the mid-4s for the ERA?
I think one of the big differences for me between Clarke Schmidt, Bowden Francis, and Ronel Blanco is just that Ronel Blanco got a 30 prospects rating on his command, from Fangraphs. And yes, that was a long time ago, but then after he got that 30, he regularly put up 10s, 11s, 12s, 13s when it came to walk rate and in the minors. And some of those, one of those 13s came in seasons where he was a reliever. So he should be showing better walk rates as a reliever than a starter. We don't have a long history of good walk rates and starting for him. And so I'm going to fall on the side of this is a guy that got kind of lucky-ish when it comes to command on the breaking ball, which is not his best pitch. His best pitch is the changeup. And he was also pretty predictable about where he put that breaking ball. Which maybe goes hand in hand. He's like, hey, this is the place I can put it. I'm going to keep putting it there. But I think that the combination of control or command that seems to go in and out, and then the fact that his slider is not his best pitch, I think that slider is going to get hit more next year. So I don't have him very high. I would much rather have Blanco or Schmidt. And I don't think I can make exactly the same case for him. And I think command is really the sticky point for me.
All right, you're either Francis or Schmidt than Blanco. You think the market has them right in this case. Then the question is, of the 3 guys that go right after him in this group, Drew Rasmussen, whose injury history is both unfortunate to the extreme degree, but also kind of impressive that he's even made it back to the big leagues after all of this. You have him versus Gavin Williams and Jesús Luzardo. Are you taking Blanco over any of those guys, or is he easily the last of the group?
Rasmussen, man. I made a joke once to Pete Fairbanks that maybe his body just can't contain his stuff. And that's how I feel about Rasmussen. He just throws so nasty. He's just so nasty. I don't know how many innings he's going to put up. I could see him being the closer. I don't know. It's not 2 Tommy Johns for him. It's 3. Because he had 2 in college. And the college history is just really strange. I have not been able to get really a straight answer from anybody about what happened with those 2 Tommy Johns in college. So, I guess I have him ahead of Blanco just because I think the upside is great. And at this point, I might chase upside because I'm not even sure how many innings I'll get from any of these guys. But I might have Gavin Williams number 1.
And why are you a Gavin Williams believer now?
Well, he did well in the revamp, and his stuff plus went up to 105, and I think that fits with my sort of eyeball test of Gavin Williams stuff. Because he throws 97 with a 2-plane fastball and some hard breaking balls, so 105 stuff plus actually makes much more sense to me than 99. Below average stuff that didn't make sense to me. I think the command is good. He has a 3.57 ERA projection. I do think that the innings total makes him hard to rank Right now, I have a pretty aggressive ranking on him, but I only have 135 innings next to his name. So I'm moving him down maybe closer to Nick Lodolo, but that's still top 60. So he doesn't deserve to be in this tier.
Yeah, I like Williams a lot from this group. He got to 142 and a third innings in 2023 between AA, AAA, and his big league debut. As you mentioned, he throws hard.
Just let him go. Good. They need somebody like this pretty bad next to Bybee, you know?
Would it be a bold prediction to say, even if you like Tanner Bybee, that Gavin Williams will be a more valuable pitcher this year, a more valuable fantasy pitcher than Tanner Bybee?
No. I mean, they have the exact same ERA projection by Stuff Plus.
Yeah, and I think that upper end velocity that Williams brings, you were worried about Bybee's fastball. You're not worried about Gavin Williams' fastball. So I think that's sort of a difference that could flip the order of those guys over the course of this season. We close it out today with Jesús Luzardo out of the pitcher-friendly confines of Miami, but into a better team context situation in Philly. The update we got earlier in the offseason was encouraging. It felt like nothing happened health-wise, I think is what he said last year when he missed time with a back injury. So that is good. But this would also be a pitcher that I'd put in the extreme high injury risk bucket. I mean, not far away from Clarke Schmidt in terms of missing time with a variety of different things. When he's been out there, he's shown us a lot in terms of skills in recent years. I mean, a 30% K rate back in 2022 and a 28.1% to follow it up over 178 and 2/3 innings with the Marlins in 2023. So we have that upper end swing and miss stuff that is in there. What do you think Philadelphia can add to the equation for Jesús Luzardo?
The one thing that I like about going where he's going is that the Philadelphia Phillies have been really good at coaching multiple fastball shapes out of one player. And Jesús Luzardo has a really boring fastball, and it's not a good shape. The only thing that's good about it is velo, and last year was his worst velo. So that I would generally be out on a player like this, but he's thrown a cutter a couple times in his career, and he used to throw a sinker. I think the Phillies might be able to coax him back into 3 fastballs along with the slider and change. And that could just help him, I think, when it comes to home run rates, ground ball rates, getting the most out of a fastball that doesn't have the same velo anymore. And some of the things that he hasn't been that good at. I mean, he has a 1.25 home runs per 9. Luzardo does for his career. And he's going into Philadelphia, Citizens Bank Park. So you might expect that number to go up, and most of the projections do. But maybe he can counteract that regression with the 3 fastball shapes. And that's something that the Phillies are good at. Caleb Cotham is one of the best pitching coaches in baseball, I think. And they have a really good pitching system where most of those guys come up, like Ranger Suarez and company, they come up with multiple fastballs. So that's one thing that I think is in his favor. But on the injury side, I mean, I have him with a 75th percentile injury risk. I'm going to give him like 121 innings, I think. It's a 3.98 projection. Like it's kind of boring across the line. I don't have him really circled as a sleeper due to, his talents. And then I can't say that he's going to give you a lot of innings either. So I have him like right now in the 90s, which is kind of where this tier should be, I think.
I feel like it's a tad low. I like him a little more than you do, I think. And
okay,
it's having the slider and changeup both get whiffs, and the fastball velocity before last year was in that 96 range, 96.7 in 2023. So if we attribute that downcline to health,
back,
I think you're going to get some of it back. And then if the possibility of adding a cutter back in there or getting the sinker usage up is in there, there's a few tweaks you can still make that would, I think, more than offset the difference at home park. So I'm in on Luzardo at this price. I think maybe he's a little bit of a watch and see at the start of spring training just to make sure everything's good on the health front. But this seems like a pretty good discount. Another one of those injury discounts that you have to at least consider at the current price. All right, we made it most of the way through our rundown. We extended arts and crafts time by 4 hours today. We'll have another episode next week focusing on starting pitchers. We're going to get to closers on our next position preview. So a lot of ground for us to still cover in the next few episodes. You can join our Discord, fill out the Hive Mind rankings. Thanks to Brian Smith for producing this episode and not trolling me again. I think that's a 2-show streak, maybe a 3-show streak for Brian. It's hard to count. Everything is blurring together for us during the series, but it's been fun so far. You can find us on Bluesky. Eno's at enosaris.bsky.social. I'm dvr.bsky.social. If you're hearing this on Thursday or Friday, jump into PitchCon. You can see all the links from Nick Pollock's social profile. It's for charity, for ALS, so be sure to jump in there. Watch some great panels over the course of the end of the week and the weekend. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. Back with you on Friday.
Thanks for listening.